Hello, and welcome to the We All Follow podcast. My name is Matt Fox. I am your host. Today, I am joined by two illustrious guests Ben Mattinson, the man who is prepping threads as we speak. How's it going, bud?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's been a really boring international break, but we are
Bad
here
as
for
hell.
this next week is going to make up for all of it. And Sean, welcome back, Sean.
How's it going, everybody?
Uh,
Once again, I'm still outside, so the weather's been fantastic here. Not as nice as some of these other states, but it's still pretty nice.
we outside has a very different meaning depending on where you live, Sean. So,
Yeah, outside.
well, awesome. As always, follow us on X at We All Follow Pod, and let's hop right into it, boys, because we can do the international break if you have a moment from the international break that caught your eye. Obviously, there was some big matches the last game week that we haven't been here to talk about, but what do you guys have for the moment of the week, Ben?
Oof. Trying to think. I mean, for me, it's got to be the. It's a negative one, but I'm still not over it. That Rice red card, and then every single instance of someone kicking the ball away throughout the whole weekend that we got to watch was not even given as no cards, no free kicks or anything like that, no anything. But yeah, Rice was sent off, so he's now missing for North London Derby, which is yeah, lovely.
Super fun. Sean, moment of the week.
Yeah, I was watching the San Marino and Liechtenstein match, and San Marino had never won a competitive match, uh, and they scored a goal, and it was from a teenager who's I think he plays in Series C, something like this. But they ended up winning, and the Twitter admins were going crazy, or the X admins, whatever you call them now, going crazy. But it's we're talking about this off stage about the Nations League. I think that they've done a really good job, matching these teams up. San Marino, Liechtenstein, Gibraltar, getting the smaller teams, you know, competitive. Look, it doesn't matter. They play Germany, they get beat 7-0. It doesn't help either team. So it's I think it's helped raise. I mean, you see a team like North Macedonia who's playing pretty well now. It's helped raise the level across Europe, and I think that ends up helping the Premier League because these guys end up, you find some guys from North Macedonia or whatever, a hidden gem, and they, all of a sudden they're playing in the Premier League. So that was my moment.
I think you find out that if you find a country small enough, San Marino can beat them. That's I think that's my takeaway from that. Um, my moment of the week was not so much the sending off of Declan Rice, but the stupid look that man had on his face, like, well, what am I supposed to do? And that was like the most irritating part of the whole thing. Because like if it would have been Michael Oliver, it would have been like whatever. Michael Oliver's Michael Oliver, right? But when you have this guy who's literally within the rules of refereeing, it talks about discretion, right? And it talks about the ability of the referee to be able to make decisions that are based on the game state and not necessarily the rule book, right? And then you have this guy, this situation happen where we know all the details, right? But then for the referee to saunter over there and be like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't have a choice. When it's like, no, dude, you have a choice. Like you have a choice, and you decided to put yourself in the middle of this game. So my moment of the week is, ooh, the freaking goofy look that dude made.
I, I have a question for both of you. Do you think this is my theory that the Premier League referees do some of this stuff like it's part of the drama, and that's why so much press is around it, and it's all over the world. I feel like it's not like this in other countries, but maybe it is. But I just feel like they make some of these decisions sometimes because it drives traffic to the stories and to the eyeballs and all this. I mean, do you guys feel like sometimes that happens?
I mean, I think for me, I find it curious that they're only English referees. So you mean to tell me that the 20 best referees in the world are all English when none of them are refereeing at the World Cup? That's not possible, right? So there's this thing in with that I can see, at least as far as I can see, with English culture and the FA and about like keeping it English and promoting English referees, which like from a ground roots perspective makes sense, right? You want to encourage people to referee, you want to build them up the pyramid, right? But when you have a product that's worth gajillions of dollars, right? That's a technical term. Then you have to have the best referees. Like you can't let these guys who are constantly being demoted to VAR, which is even worse because VAR is a very specific technical skill set. You can't have these guys who are of this poor level. And I think I said this the other day, like at what point does incompetence become negligence? Right? And like I think that's where we're bordering on because I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. Like I genuinely think that these guys are a bunch of idiots from Manchester who have their biases, right? And like see an opportunity where they can be involved, right? And like I don't think it's necessary. I don't even think the league needs to say anything for this dumb shit to happen. I think it just happens organically, right? Like it would be if it was like a VAR decision or whatever, like to me that's okay. You could possibly make that argument, right? But for me, it's like a mixture of incompetence with a good old boy network of there's no challenging to these guys who have these bad performances and there's no accountability, right? So like you have this kind of perfect storm of shit that's going on. Like I know you guys remember the La Liga game where Jude was crossing it, or the
Yeah,
Madrid game last season, right, where the ref blew the whistle
Scored
in
it.
the middle of the play.
Yeah,
Like so, the
it was in the
incompetence
box.
happens everywhere. Like I don't think it's unique to the Premier League, but I think it's the way that those people are held or not held accountable for their actions that is part that's missing the mark. And again, the inconsistency, right, Ben? Because you talked about watching all the other games and there's no consistency.
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue for me with all of this stuff is if there's rules, there should be consistency throughout every game, and it's should be a right or wrong type of thing. If you're going to introduce something like VAR, you should be able to have make it more black and white. But the issue of football is there's so many grey areas, and there's some things like this with the kicking the ball away, which is like if that's a rule, that's a rule, and if it's the letter of the law, then it should be in every single game. Then I wouldn't mind it. Then I would be like, oh, he's had a little touch here, but then again, João Pedro kicked the ball away and he got a yellow card, or you know what I mean? Like you would be okay with it then. You wouldn't complain about it. You would complain more at Rice for whatever. But I also look at that and think there's been a few moments where the league is like they've allowed a level of aggression from certain players. If you look at Veltman blatantly kicking Rice, if you look at in the first half, he threw Trossard on the floor by his neck at one point, and earlier in the first half, if he got a yellow for the first thing, probably wouldn't have done the second. And there's a bit of that sometimes where referees don't. They're not managing the game properly. Like that's something there we could see that, and you can just kill it straight away. And if you look at the stuff with when we played Newcastle and Bruno Gomes thought he was a UFC fighter and was going around elbowing and punching everyone. If he got yellow for the first one, the rest wouldn't have happened, and maybe it wouldn't have been so heated. And then there wouldn't have been all the controversy at the end of the game as well about all of that. So that's a big thing for me, just having a bit more consistency. But I will say, I'm not. There's two sides of this where some people go really extreme and say it's all a conspiracy, it's all against us, and then others say, "Oh, these lot are overreacting. It's not all against you. It's not you against the world." But if you're talking about a multi-billion industry and league, there is going to be some of that there, or there's at least going to be if we were if you two were a club and I was a referee and I was best mates with you and we would go out and have drinks and stuff, then you're playing another team. I'm going to have a slight bias whether I want to or not. It's going to be hard to put that aside, and I think that's probably something that happens a lot. A lot of people speak about with Ferguson. He had a big impact on a lot of the referees, and he was close with a lot of them. When you look over the years, some of the games that they had, I'm like, oh, he got extra time at the end, or got some decisions that went their way, but I'm not going to go full on, and I don't like focusing on the referee stuff at the end of the game. And I think no matter what is thrown at you as a team, you've got to be able to have stuff that goes against you and still come out with a win. If you're going to win anything, if you're going to win a title, that's what Arsenal, City, anyone is going to have to do. So, yeah.
John, out of curiosity, because after the game, we saw one thing that I've complained about in the past, right, is about the tribalism as it pertains to poor refereeing decisions, right? And it's like an opportunity to take the piss out of another team and their fans and win fake internet points on X. And this was really one of the first times that I saw where like everybody was on the same page about how silly the decision was. Did you find that to be intriguing based on the usual type of reactions that we see?
Yeah, I coached. I've coached it up to like a U23s. I coach, I obviously high school sports are big here, but up to U23. If I was coaching that game and that happened to one of my players, I would have been livid. And I just think, sometimes there's like a point where you're just like, most of my people are, on minor Manchester United fans, and everyone was like, man, that's a terrible decision. Like, it's not part of the match. It's just like and you're just watching it, and everybody is just like, this is what they're gonna call now. Like the game, I've seen the game is gone a million times over the years. It's just like you get to the point where like, man, if this is what they're sending people up for now, like it's what's the point? Like like this is crazy. And you see all these fans, and once again, most of my timeline is United fans, and they're just so like, that's terrible. It's terrible. Like it's just that's so soft. It's terrible. It's not a sending off. And there's been other points, through the years, but I just think I talk about the referees a little bit because I just think people are it's just the whole discourse around like VAR, semi-automatic. This stuff isn't hard. Like you watch these other leagues and the offsides is done in like it's
Yeah, the fact that
15
we're
seconds.
getting semi-automated offsides, but it's
It's
not until October.
yeah.
I'm like, what?
How
We have
like
all summer. What are you
how can
doing?
you not? That's the other thing. Like, how can you play 5 or 6 matches and then bring it in? Like, what about the games that would have been just like either do it at the beginning or at the end? You can't just do it in the middle. But like the Premier League changes these, like they've changed the handball rules in the middle of the season, and you're just like, wait a second, like, what about the games that would have been like just wait until it's a fresh start? But you just see that, and I just see this discord. I think like the tide is turning against a lot of this stuff. I mean, people are just getting like every week you just see it's like it's bad decision, bad decision, bad decision, and like that's not what people want. They want to watch the proper. They this week the Barclays man was trending all over the place. The old school Barclays, in the late '90s and early 2000s. That's what they want to see. They don't want to see all this other stuff. It's too much.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm cautiously optimistic that these types of events can be what coalesces fans together,
I
right?
don't want to
Because
watch. Like, I don't want to see.
no,
Like,
right,
you guys want. Like, I want to see Arsenal play Tottenham with their strongest lineup, and
right.
it
Any fan does, right? Because as even
yeah,
if you're
it's
neutral,
stupid.
it's gonna be the best
Yeah,
show,
it's
right?
stupid. Like, I'm a Manchester United fan, obviously, but like, I I'm a big fan of the league, and I watch all the matches. I don't want to see like, look, you just take away, and now Odegaard's hurt. You all of a sudden half your midfield is taken away, and you got to go into this game, and it's just like I'm like fed up with all the refereeing stuff.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
biggest thing is it takes the conversation away from the game, which is
Yep.
why we're all here. And it shouldn't be. It should just be straightforward. And it got to a point where I'm looking at like, when you would watch a game and then miss something completely because they don't have VAR, that look would go both ways. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. And I'm like, I'd almost be like, just that was fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're not going to use VAR or properly, or the semi-automated stuff, and like I think that's down the right route to properly use those things, but they're just not doing it. I don't know how you can have such expensive and so much technical, like different technical stuff to use, but it's still failing. I don't get it, but like I said, we should be talking about the games that happened last week, and this was such a big issue that people were talking about it for like a whole week.
Yeah, it's really a shame, it's really a shame. And lastly on this topic, the fact that you can't review yellow cards is ridiculous. There's so many cases over the last few years. Like, I can just think of off the top of my head, the yellows against Arsenal with Man City, when Kovacic took out the ankles of two of the Arsenal players. The Kai Havertz tackle on Newcastle that probably should have been a red card that would have gone against Arsenal had that yellow been able to be reviewed. Like, the fact that you can't review a yellow card is so stupid. Like, there's no reasoning there's no like
cameras in the
logical
stadium.
reasoning.
They see everything. Like
Right.
it's not like there's an excuse now. Oh yeah, we didn't see it. There's so many different cameras in the stadium now. Like if you ever watch the match afterwards, and you see like all the goals angle. They have cameras everywhere. You could see it from space. Like there's no reason not to be able to do this at this point.
Yeah, so and that, again, that's like a procedural thing, right? Like, review the yellow card.
Yeah.
If you think it's a yellow, fine. You can give yellow a wide berth, right? But if you think that it's either not a yellow or potentially a red, then it should automatically go to review, right? And it's just, the whole system is messed up, right? And I think that's what is becoming more and more evident every week, is that the system, like VAR as an idea, is great. VAR, when it's implemented properly, is great. We see it at international tournaments, we see it in other leagues, and it's awesome. And it's the implementation of this specific league that is failing, right? So anyway, that's enough on that topic. That's our moments of the week, unfortunately. And let's hop on in the Discord if you're not already in there, which you probably are. Did you guys want to touch on any of the other games? We had another Holland hat trick, right? He's got what, 7 goals in 3 games?
Yeah. Have you seen the stat to do with? I think it's how long it's taken players to get to 8 hat tricks in the Premier League, and it's like
No.
It's like big names like Henry, Aguero, and whoever, and they're all like 200 and something, 300 and whatever, and then Haaland's is like 67, and you're like, huh? Like it's not even like a tiny bit; it's a massive. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Even when you look at him and look at how City play, the system that they've got now they've got those more direct wingers. That suits Haaland a lot more. I think that's Pep. He's not getting enough credit, although Pep gets so much credit. He's not getting enough credit for how he's tweaked that, because it now means they've got 2 different ways of playing. They're not even playing Rodri and Foden, and they're sweeping teams aside. And they've got 2 different options now. When those guys come back, probably next week against Arsenal, come back fresh and ready for a big game. The fact they can do that is just mental. Meanwhile, Arsenal thinking what academy players are going to play.
Yeah, we also had the big game up in the north. Sean, you want to get us in on the Man United 0, Liverpool 3 result?
Did we play Liverpool? I don't even remember. Yeah, I just, you got to, I said 1,000 times, we just got to get to this break. I think, it's almost like the season starts from here. I mean, some of these guys are going to start to come back. Garte, I mean, they hooked Casemiro off. He's atrocious. Well, I think we've talked about. I know Nigel has talked about it. The system doesn't suit him. The way that they set up. I think that's on Ten Hag a little bit, but he wasn't very good. So Luke Shaw is probably back within the week. He probably won't play this weekend. Ugarte could play this weekend. I think they're just, Liverpool's just better than them at this point. once again, though, I think Liverpool. Everyone talks about how good they are, and look, they've been all right. But remember, last year they're very good until like March, and then the squad depth, and all of a sudden a couple injuries, and then they just fell off a cliff right away. I mean, I think that's going to be something. I think people are saying, hey, they could win a title. Look, let's just wait and see. I'm once again, I'm not sure about their squad depth. I think if they have a couple injuries, I think they're in a lot of trouble. Um, but they looked very good so far. And I'm just glad this weekend that United's the first match. It's 7:30 where I am, so either it's going to either my weekend will be all right, or I'll just be done with it, and then off to work at 10 a.m. and not have to think about watching them and looking at Ten Hag again. So I'm actually glad, because then the better games are Spurs Arsenal Sunday, Aston Villa Everton, I think, which is interesting, and some of the other ones.
Yeah, Everton in bit of a rough spot at this point. We already talked about that last week, and here they are again. 3 games, no points. Ben, did you get a chance to check out the Newcastle Spurs match last week?
I'm trying to remember off the top of my. Yeah. That was
With the Isak winner.
Yeah. He always seems to score against them, doesn't he? He's a gunner at heart. No, yeah, I did. It was one of those where obviously quite end to end. I think I'm trying to remember now. I think I missed the first half and I watched the second half, but I remember there was quite a few moments where little things where like Romero is really aggressive coming out to get the ball, and they weren't covering for him, and then there's big spaces in behind the defense, and they're able to get some quite good quality chances, Newcastle, and didn't really finish them. I think if they had come against them like in better form, they could have got a couple more goals. But yeah, there's definitely a thing with Tottenham where they concede a lot of chances and a lot of high quality or high XG chances. And if you're more clinical, then they can get quite a few goals against them. Obviously, there was that. Was it 6-1? I think a couple of years ago. Yeah. So I think there's moments of that game that would give Arsenal a bit of confidence, but at the same time, they don't have the same style to someone like Newcastle. I think Newcastle are the perfect style team to play against Tottenham, whereas they're going to be just as physical, just as good running, more intense, and they're going to get right in the face. And I think when you put their defence under a lot of pressure, that you can nick the ball off them. I think early in the season, a lot of these defenders, there's been a lot of errors from players, I would say, defenders on the ball that wouldn't normally. I think they're just a little bit rusty still because it's still early, which looking forward to this week, I think might be something where Tottenham might see where they can get at Arsenal, but we'll get onto that later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was a 6-1 Newcastle win a few years back. It was Callum Wilson, Isak with the brace, Jacob Murphy with the brace, and Joelinton being the goal scorers for Newcastle, and Harry Kane being the goal scorer for Tottenham. They seem, but it's weird because they had that game and then they kind of seem to have Newcastle's number in the last few fixtures. But yeah, they couldn't make it happen this week. And that kind of brings us into our next match, which is going to be the North London Derby. So we have, I put the logos the wrong way around, but it's at Spurs at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Arguably the nicest stadium in the league at this point. Sean, how do you see this one going?
I was going to say kind of before we started talking about this, when you look at the league table right now, obviously, Manchester City, Arsenal, these teams, I don't think there's a lot of difference between basically the teams. I think this league is very intriguing this year. Going into this, obviously, I would say probably without Rice and Odegaard's probably out, right? Is he out for the game? Is he still? Um,
Guaranteed.
Spurs probably at home, and they're probably favored and stuff like this. But obviously Arsenal is gonna, it's gonna be, you can't just go by who's out. I think someone will step up, and they always do for Arsenal. So I think it could be a very intriguing game. Look, Tottenham's going to give you chances in the game. I mean, it's just a matter of if you take them or not. If Arsenal takes their chances, maybe gets a couple goals, they could definitely win this game. I wouldn't be stunned if they did. Obviously, I think Spurs are going to be up for it, and probably favored. But I could see probably a high 2-2 draw or something like that. I think it's going to obviously. I wish it was switched a little bit. It was the later game, but it doesn't really matter. I think that should be the showcase match of the weekend. The fact that you got that, and then you got Wolves Newcastle afterwards is a little bit of a buzzkill there. But yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think it'll be intriguing. I was lingering around Twitter yesterday and hopped into a Spurs space, and was just asking some simple questions. And there was a lot of optimism um, over in that neck of the woods. It only took 2/3 of Arsenal's starting midfield to be actually 3/3 because Marino, Rice, and Odegaard are all now out. It only took the whole midfield to be out for the Spurs fans to become confident in this case. It's interesting what you said, Sean, because the odds as of 3 hours ago with Betfair, Tottenham to win 19-10, draw 13-5, and Arsenal win 13-10. So Arsenal are actually still favorites in this match. At least according to the betting odds, which we know are influenced in order to induce betting. Um, but it
Popular.
still means that the way that the money is moving means that um, Arsenal are at least the betting favorites, which is intriguing to me. Ben, I think you've probably spent most of the last 3 nights when you've been trying to fall asleep figuring out what midfield three Arteta is going to go with. Um, how do you think that, like, obviously the narrative of the players being out is what it is, but with the players that are there, how would you set up if you were Arteta?
Yeah, there's been so much about this. I mean, I think it's hard to tell with Arteta because you can only go off history, and I think history has shown is he'll choose the players that are more senior that have played the most. But the issue there is you've got two players in Partey and Jorginho who are both sixes, and you wouldn't really play as an eight. So you then look at it like, are those two going to play in a double pivot, and then you play Havertz, who's also played in midfield, as the more advanced midfielder? I'll, that would probably work in terms of ball progression, but it really lacks the physicality in midfield with Jorginho and Partey, where Partey's not looked as physical as before, and Jorginho never really has been. So I would think that's what he might go with if you're going off previously, but we've also never seen Odegaard not available. So what he does in this situation, we're not sure. I think Vieira going out on loan means the only player that plays on that right centre midfielder normally, or throughout their career, is Ethan Nwaneri. And whether he's going to come in or not, because he's never started, that would be huge. Well, probably one of the biggest, well, one of the two biggest games that he could start in. But I kind of would like to see it happen. I won't lie. It's either, I've got two sides to it. I'd either like us to move Saka to play the right centre midfield, almost like a number 10, and give him freedom to move about, because I think he can help the left-hand side a lot, combining with the left. In that more central zone, he's going to have better shooting angles. He's going to have more space on the ball, more time. He's got very good passing as well, creative ability. And I think if you put him in that area, we've seen it with someone like Foden, where this is slightly different with Foden because he's not a natural winger, but put him in a more central area. Suddenly he had a lot more space there to have shots from distance last season, and he became quite an important player for City. So I would like to see that or Nwaneri. I think it will be Havertz, and then the other two, I would like to see Party and possibly Timber, but I'm really unsure about the thing with Timber because he's the stuff with his knee and his injury coming back. I think playing in midfield might be a bit too much movement for him at this early stage. And I think the club will probably rather be a bit cautious with that. They don't want to risk anything. But the main thing now we've got Sterling there, it does give us an option where you can play someone like Saka more central and you can play Sterling off the right. You've got a natural right winger there who's okay going outside and being more direct, which means they're not going to be in the same space. Obviously, with this whole stuff with Saka and Odegaard, Saka wants to come inside, Odegaard wants to be in that same half space, and they're both left-footed, so they're kind of in a similar area. Whereas if you've got Saka coming inside on his left, and then Sterling providing the width, and then you've got the fullback underlapping, that would work really nicely, I think. So I would, if it was me, I would either have Saka right wing, one area is the right centre mid, or Saka right centre mid, Sterling off the right, and then Party and Timber. If Timber's not okay to play midfield, you just swap him for Jorginho and just hope that we can manage the transitions a bit better. But the most important thing, that back four is going to be solid. They're going to have Calafiori at left back. I'll definitely go with him at left back, and then White, Gabriel, Saliba. I think that back four, perfect there, and the attack could cause a lot of problems as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because although we have the shell of a midfield, finally, if Jesus is fit, we'll have our full complement of forwards, and with the exception of Tomiyasu, who we don't even count because he's never available, we have our full complement of typically available defenders, right? So the strengths are there, right? It's about how do we manage the middle of the park. The thing that so like if I'm thinking what do I think Mikel will do, it'll probably be to play Jorginho at the 6, play Party at the 8. He's done it before, or Arteta has done it before, and then either Havertz on the left and Jesus up top, or Trossard at the 8 and Havertz at the top. My hunch is that he'll want to make fewer changes, right? Which is like something that he talks about a lot.
Yeah.
So he'll probably keep Havertz up front, let Trossard play in the left 8, and then run the Party Jorginho thing. One note that I had in the last game about Party was, so I'm not sure if Party is fully cooked yet, right? In terms of like, I don't know if he's finished, right? I'm not like putting that out because he's
No, I don't
come
think
back
it
from
is.
this surgery and there's moments where he's been really good. He looks like he has about 50 solid minutes in his legs, right? But even in him being a step off, there's this thing that Jorginho does where he knows his physical limitations, right? And so he'll make a tackle that he may or may not get to, right? Higher up the pitch, knowing that he can't make it back, right? Party is still playing like he has the athleticism, right? So like the thing, if I was coaching Party, one, obviously we want your body to be back to where it is. But for the time being, I need you to play like you're injured because I need you to be more conservative in the way that you're approaching these tackles so that we don't have um these types of situations. I think that's kind of what happened with the Brighton goal that they ended up scoring. That being said, um the Waneri thing is so intriguing to me because I think it's possible that he's ready, right? I think that's in the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Um, Based on what we've seen so far, based on what we're hearing, I mean, just watching him play, in the preseason, and obviously it's totally different. But I was looking back at like Cesc Fabregas's kind of trajectory,
One of
right?
my favorites.
And obviously he's one of the best. He's an regardless of what you think about him and his decisions, he's an Arsenal legend. Um, and Cesc Fabregas was the youngest Arsenal player at the time to play in the first team, right? He Played in some League Cup games that year, and but he didn't play in the Premier League at all. He didn't get a winner's medal that year because he didn't play in a league game. And then the next year, Patrick Vieira got injured and he played 4 consecutive games. Obviously, the game that he came into was not the North London Derby away at Spurs, right? So that's different. And I think it's categorically different, and thus it makes these situations really hard to compare, right? But um in all, like, there's a famous story, Sean will know this one, about oh, what's the name? Now I can't remember. The first baseman for the Yankees that played a gajillion games in a row until Cal Ripken broke the streak.
Oh, Lou Gehrig.
Lou Gehrig, Ben, in
Junior
baseball played like 2,000 games in a row, right? The way that Lou Gehrig got his,
2,130.
thank you. I knew you'd know that. He played for like 20 years in a row, didn't miss a game. And this is baseball plays 162 games a season. They play every day for 9 months. Um, the guy Wally Pipp was the name of the player that he replaced, and Wally Pipp, I think he had like a stomach ache or some shit that day,
Yep.
and he sat on the bench,
And
and
he
he never played
got
again.
back in.
He never got back in the team. Obviously, I'm not saying that Waneri's going to come in and take Odegaard's spot, but these are the type of opportunities that players can seize. You know what I mean? You have a big game. Maybe Sean's right, and it's tied 1-1 in the 60th minute. Party's legs are starting to go. We know Jorginho cannot play 90 minutes. It's not possible. He hasn't played a minute yet, so he's not coming in playing 90. You say, okay, Party, I want you to drop into the 6th. Ethan, it's your time to shine. So we'll see. We'll see. I think it's a big opportunity. I think it'll say a lot about how Arteta trusts in this player, because he talked a big game. He let players go out that weren't playing. He let Vieira go out. He let Smith Rowe leave, which I think those were both the right decisions. No matter what happens with Odegaard, I think those are the right decisions. But you make those decisions standing on business about the guy that you have, who you say can step up into that situation. So I think it's an opportunity for Mikel to put his money where his mouth is. And I think it's going to be a big game. And I'm genuinely, like, even from a trying to be objective perspective, I think that Arsenal's team is not as weak as it looks, even with these guys out.
Yeah.
I think that Arsenal having all of their defense, like you said, the solidity at the back, which is everything that Mikel builds off of, having the full complement of attacking options to bring on a Sterling, to bring on either a Trossard or a Martinelli, depending on who you start. Like, it's going to create problems for this team, and Ange is going to Ange. You know what I mean?
I think as well with how Tottenham will play, they're going to play so high, so aggressive because they're at home. They're going to want to come and try to take control of the game and get in Arsenal's faces. So you might end up actually seeing Arteta being like, oh, actually, we're going to sit back and we're going to soak up all this pressure and we're going to beat you on the counter because you're playing a high line. We did it last time. And if we can get some set pieces, there's goals there as well. And the back four that we've got are all massive and really good in the air. And Havertz as well. That's another thing where we can get a result. And I think one of the reasons I said about with Jorginho and Partey in midfield was because if we win the ball, they can both quickly release it, and they've got better passing from that sort of zone, that deeper area. And you almost want to say to them, don't go forward, just never go forward, just stay at the base of midfield, and allow the fullbacks. Even if we've got Ben White and Calafiori, they can do a lot more of the legwork that those two would do. But the stuff with one area as well, like what you're saying, it's making me think. We've had it before with so many teams recently have done it. City bringing in Rico Lewis, not last season, the
Even
season
Oscar
before.
Bob,
Yeah,
like
Oscar
these
Bob.
guys who you've literally never heard of before. They
Yeah,
just
and
rock
also
up and
last
are
season with
put
Man
in an
United.
8 out of 10.
Exactly, and last season with Man United, Mainu, the same thing, coming in, and people. The thing is, it was at a really low point for them, and he came in and played against Liverpool and scores a screamer, and that's in the history books now. That from his point of view, from his career, that should give him that should help propel him. And if you, as a manager, put the trust in a player at that stage of their career, Nwaneri might look at it and be like, you know what, I've got like minutes here. I could get a good run in the team. If Odegaard's out, I have a good performance. He's going to want to. And I actually think if the midfield's the same, like, the two older guys and Nwaneri, you've not got as much pressure on him. You've still got Saka and you've still got, I don't know, Martinelli, Trossard, maybe Sterling, and then Jesus, Havertz. These more senior guys, they've all got to step up. If one area has a stinker, it doesn't matter because he's the young guy getting his first game. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be on everyone else if he doesn't do well. But more likely, because he's surrounded by all the more senior guys, it probably might help him to go up to that level. One of the things I noticed about him in general, if you look at him in the pre-season, when he's had a couple of short appearances, when he played with Timber, he plays up to the level around him. When he's with other intelligent players, his intelligence shows even more. And I think if you put him in that environment, in a high-pressure situation, we're going to see the best of him. We're going to see that he's the guy that could play those through balls on the counter or outside the box, shoot in the top corner, whatever it is, he's got that in him. So, yeah, either way, there's an opportunity for someone to step up in an unfamiliar place, and I think it could be Nwaneri or it could be Saka.
Yeah. Sean, before you have to go, thanks for joining us today. So what's your official prediction? And if you want to say any last words on the North London Derby.
I say 2-2, and then I just quickly too. I wanted to just kind of one of the other games I think on Saturday that's a little bit intriguing is that late game. Chelsea obviously real chaotic. Their matches are just total chaos, and I think Bournemouth is one of these teams that have high XG, and they've played really one of the surprise teams here, and I just Chelsea's a mess. They got all this stuff going on with Clear Lake and Todd Bowley, and I always think those matches are really fun to watch because you just don't know Chelsea's going to implode the next time they play, or they're going to score 6 goals. You just don't know. I think that's an interesting game, and I talked about the Villa Everton game. I mean, Everton. Look, they have some winnable matches coming up, but they're the same thing. I mean, they're kind of a miss right now. So but I do think Arsenal gets something from the match.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for coming on, Sean. We'll see you next week, probably.
Thank you. I see you,
Yeah.
Ben. Yep.
Ben, one thing that I had also been thinking about, I can't remember which match it was. I think it might have been the League Cup match against Brentford, if I'm not mistaken, where we played 2 6s, right? We played a double pivot. It was either one of the FA Cup games or one of the League Cup games last year, where we played 2 defensive midfielders, like proper 6s.
Yeah.
Do you think that Arteta might consider doing something like that, to kind of get Partey and Jorginho lower to the base so they're not running as much, and then potentially playing a more 10-10?
Yeah, I think that would be best. When you're looking at the profiles we've got available in midfield, you've either got 2 older guys that don't really have legs right now, or you've got someone like Timber who could play there, but you don't want him running too much. So you've got 3 players there that you'd rather them be staying as like a deep lying playmaker rather than bombing up the pitch, being like the normal box crushing left centre midfielder. Neither of them are going to be that. And then it allows the number 10 to really have a lot more freedom, which is where I think either you've got Havertz playing a bit like when he was at Leverkusen as like an actual number 10, rather than just off the left as well. There was a game, can't remember who it was against. You remember when he played right centre midfield early on in the season, and I remember he had this one shot, and everyone was like, "Wait, this Havertz
Yeah.
might be all
I
right."
remember.
Yeah, I can't.
It might have been Brentford.
Yeah, no, yeah, it might have been actually. I think it was that same cup game, and maybe
It
that's
was
the
the ball that
situation.
went like it was from the right outside of the right corner of the box, and
Yeah,
he hit it, and it like almost went into the top corner.
yeah, yeah. It was that one. Yeah, and so you've got someone like that with Havertz, where he's very good at ghosting into spaces, and Tottenham don't have a out and out number six. They've got through all their midfielders are more like eights or a few tens. So you might get someone like Havertz getting in behind or finding the little spaces around there. But it's where I just feel like it's perfect for someone like Nwaneri or Saka to be in the little pockets and receiving the ball from both Partey and Jorginho playing through the lines, and they can just pick up the ball and play the final ball through to Havertz or I really want Sterling to start. So Sterling or whoever it is, I think both of them would really suit it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what my mind goes to is like you have those two guys at the base, and then you start Havertz and Jesus, and Havertz is the 10 and or second striker. You know what I mean? Jesus drops in all the time. Havertz likes to go long, and then you have them interchanging, and hopefully you have Havertz knocking the ball down to Jesus who's running onto it. You know, and then you have like a Martinelli and a Saka down the wings. But just as easily you could switch Jesus out for Wineri and have Havertz be the striker and have Wineri be the 10, and then you give them a little bit less defensive responsibility. I mean, ultimately in our team, nobody gets no defensive responsibility.
Yeah,
But you kind of hide him in there, for lack of a better term, as best as you can, and really give him the freedom because listen, if he is playing, whether it's going to be off starting or off the bench, he's going to be nervous, he's going to be self-conscious, he's going to be playing within himself, right? So if I'm the manager, I know this player is going to be shitting bricks no matter how good he thinks he is, right? Somebody at the first 5 minutes, one of the Spurs players are gonna clatter into him and try to rattle him, and the fans are gonna go crazy. And those are the kinds of things, like from a managing perspective, that you have to be thinking of putting these players into these situations, right? So how can I give him the best chance to succeed? Right. And I think that's something that honestly, I think that's why you haven't seen a lot of the youth players out of Arsenal, because Arteta is very, very protective of them, and he knows that if you have one mistake in a game like this, then you can be memed for forever. You know.
yeah, yeah. And I'm kind of a bit like you don't want to go too far the opposite way where you're overprotective because then they don't get toughened up. I think either way, I would like to see him play in this game, no matter if it's starting or if it's off the bench. I think
I
he
mean,
should play.
I don't really think that there's a way around it, to be honest,
Yeah,
just from
yeah,
a
yeah,
body's perspective.
yeah. No, I don't think there is, but he's got. I think he's got to play at some point, and it's a good time to bring someone like that in and show the faith in him and see how he reacts. But the thing you were saying reminded me. There's a lot of people who've spoken about, and I think this actually, now I'm thinking about, it, is probably the way to go. But you were talking about Jesus and Havertz, but actually playing more of a 4-2-4 or 4-4-2 where the the wingers are still there. You still got, let's say, Martinelli, or I still wouldn't start Trossard. I'm tempted to start Sterling if he's ready, and seeing how he's in training, and he always plays well against Tottenham. But let's say it's Martinelli, and then you got Saka on the right, but then you actually play Havertz and Jesus as two strikers. You throw it back a bit and play like a traditional front four, if you like. Um, because I think man to man against Tottenham's defence, that's going to create so many problems. The issue with Saka is when they double up on him, and that means there's less space for him. Or the same on the left side or through the middle, and you've got Havertz against two centre backs. One can be aggressive, one can drop off. So when he beats one, the next one is there. What happens when Jesus is on the other one? Now, obviously, you've got from a midfield point of view, that will then mean there'll be 3 versus 2. But you could also bring Calafiori into midfield. Then you've got Calafiori next to and in and around both Jorginho and Partey. So that might actually be, I think, you imagine a counter attack of those four just countering. That I think that would be really dangerous against Tottenham's defence, and they will allow us to have chances. And I think if you have a front four like that, and you've got the players behind who can play the ball in behind, um, it's cutbacks galore. You know, that's why Sterling excites me. It's someone who is going to beat his player and he's going to play a cutback into the box. And someone like Jesus or Havertz can get on the end of those. It doesn't matter if that they're not the best at finishing. They're going to get on the end of that and probably tap it into the net. So that's probably a really good route. And like you said, you're playing like a double six there, and then you're allowing the front four to have that freedom and to be man to man. And it's quite easily you can lose your marker by that because let's say the right striker and the right winger can combine and get them to run into each other. But yeah, so that might be an option as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it sounds like Van de Ven will be back.
Yeah.
He skipped out on international duty with the Netherlands, and it's kind of unclear, but it sounds like Solanke will be back as well.
I
Which,
think Richarlison as well.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, assuming that Solanke's fit, I do think that he causes us issues. I think they're a much stronger team if Solanke's up top and Son is on the wing rather than Son
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
the main one. And I think they'll have chances and I think that they'll score. I think it's gonna be, can we be clinical with our chances? You know, how much can we control the match, or do, like we said, do you kind of sit back and try to hit them on the counter? It'll be really interesting tactically because, you know, it's obvious that Ange has one way of playing, right? He might have minor tactical instructional tweaks in terms of you stand here, you drift here, but the base of what he's doing is not changing, right? So I'm actually really fascinated because I think you have our Arsenal's analysts. There's one analyst whose job is to every week is to watch the Spurs game and to make reports on it. You know what I mean? Like on top of all of his other duties, or maybe that duty rotates, but somebody's watching those games and making notes. You know what I mean? So it'll be really interesting to see what Arteta cooks up for this one. What do you have as your score prediction?
Oof. I want to go 2-1 to Arsenal. Yeah. I think it might even be that they score first and then we go and get 2 goals. I want to go more confident, but until I know the lineup is, like we said, that 4-2-4, or they're going to play someone like Saka or Nwaneri more central? Is it going to be Havertz there? It's so hard to call right now because we just don't know what the team is going to look like. But based on what I think it might be, I'd say 2-1.
Okay. Yeah, I have it 2-1 as well. I think that Spurs. I ultimately I think the game will be decided in the second half. I think that Arsenal will come away with the winner. I think it's going to be a really tough, closely contested match, a very physical match. It'll be really intriguing to see how Arsenal and how Arteta solves the the midfield question ultimately. So, yeah, we'll talk to you guys after this next game week. Got some fun matches going up. Like Sean had mentioned earlier, follow us on X at We All Follow Pod, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.